Welcome to the Curiosity Cure podcast. I'm your host, Deb Malkin, Master Certified Life Coach, Body Worker, Hypnotist, trained in pain reprocessing by the Pain Psychology Center, queer elder, fat human on planet Earth, here to help you evoke the power of simple neuroplasticity techniques rooted in shame-free curiosity so you can feel more better, more of the time in the body you have today, and build the rich, full life that you want to live. A quick disclaimer, this podcast is not a replacement for medical care. I am here to provide insights and techniques that can complement your healthcare journey, but always consult with your healthcare provider for personalized advice. Hello, my feelers and healers. I am so excited to bring to you this conversation that my colleague Anna Holtzman and I had the other week. So this first appeared on her podcast, From Chronic Pain to Passion, and now you're listening to it on The Curiosity Cure. And it's a peek inside what two mind-body practitioners have to say about the human experience, both our own and working with our clients. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks.
Hey there, I'm Anna Holtzman, and this is From Chronic Pain to Passion. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and coach who helps passionate creatives like you learn how to heal from chronic pain and other symptoms so you can reclaim your energy and live the creative life of your dreams. In my past life, I was a disillusioned video editor working in reality TV and struggling with chronic migraine for over 10 years. But after I discovered the mind-body methods that I'll share with you on this podcast, I recovered from the chronic cycle and got back my creative spark. And I want that for you too. So let's get into it. Welcome back, dear listeners. I'm excited to share with you a raw and unfiltered conversation I had with my friend and colleague, Deb Malkin, all about the beautifully messy reality of being a human being who is evolving and growing while also helping others to heal and grow. Deb, whose pronouns are she, they, is a feminist, master certified mind-body pain recovery coach, specializing in using the tools of neuro and bioplasticity and consciously curious hypno-coaching to help people unlearn pain and emotional stress symptoms in order to feel better and pursue their amazing lives. Deb has helped clients recover from back pain, migraines, fibromyalgia, GI pain, and more. Deb and I are also part of a cohort of mind-body coaches who get together about twice a month and let it all hang out together, which has been so instrumental for my growth. And as we'll talk about, it's not always easy letting yourself be vulnerable, even in the most supportive of spaces. But what I find over and over again is that it's so worth it, because the healing and growth that comes from allowing ourselves to connect with one another through our vulnerability and honesty is really the only gateway to joy in life, as far as I can tell. So here's me and Deb getting real with each other and with you about what it's like to be a beautifully messy human being who helps other beautifully messy human beings. And I hope this conversation serves as a permission slip to let your own beautiful messiness shine through. I'm really psyched to be here with you, Deb.
I am very, very, very excited to be here with you, Anna.
I'm just going to pull back the curtain for our audience and say that we just jumped on this call like 5 minutes ago, and we're like, how are we going to do this? Because this is not really, I think, what either of us normally do, where one of us is interviewing another person. We're like coming on here as colleagues and friends and like connecting about some stuff that we talk about with each other, and wanted to like share it on the podcast, on both of our podcasts with our listeners.
I think what I'm excited about in this conversation is kind of inviting people to ride along with what it's like on the inside of our brains
Yes.
as mind body practitioners, right? And as human beings. Because I think the more I get to know you, what I'm really learning and seeing is like we both experience the world pretty and intensely, right?
I would say so. Yeah.
We have a lot of feelings. Maybe they're big and bright, and we talk a lot about sensitivity, but then we have this like framework that supports us. And so that's whatever this mind body stuff is, and then that shows up in our work and how we help people. But like, right? It's just
Yeah.
hard. It's a very meta experience. So sometimes when we get into
Yeah.
conversation, like this conversation basically started our decision to make this podcast was because I told you I was very jealous.
Yes. And I was like, oh, I love that because I totally and completely relate to that. And then, and I was like, and then I'll raise you also feeling shame about my jealousy because I think that since I'm a mind body practitioner, I shouldn't be a human being, which if I wasn't human being, like how on earth would I relate with my clients? So.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So for me, I
Oh,
feel like we're gonna get to dive in and explore, but also this is for me, this is the part of the relational healing part of this work. So I love
yeah.
that we're having this conversation. And so maybe a lot of this will resonate for people. Obviously, we're not just having a conversation to just
Yeah.
hang out with each other. That's nice. But we're recording it so that some of these ideas can filter through.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to invite us both to introduce ourselves because listeners, there will be listeners who've like already met one of us and not the other, and vice versa. And perhaps listeners who've never met either of us. So, um, do you want to share what you do, who you help, and just like a
Mhm.
snippet of what brought you into this work?
Yeah. So I am a mind body practitioner, a master certified coach and hypnotist. I'm a former massage therapist and restorative exercise specialist. I don't know, those are words. So I used to live in the land of the body and try to help people that way. Even before that, I worked in fashion, had plus size fashion store. And so there's always been this through line of like, I am here to support people in their embodied experience in the world. And then as life goes, how we do that, like how we live out our mission changes. And so I had my own mind body experience where I recovered from chronic knee pain, like pretty dramatically overnight in a way that I never knew was possible, right? All of my training had told me that like musculoskeletal issues have a musculoskeletal reason, and that at like 50 years old and being a larger person, being a fat person, my pain should not diminish or be essentially gone like overnight. And that was my experience many years ago through the work of learning about the Curable app and Dr. Sarno. And so from that point, my work just took a pivot, and then COVID pivoted it even more by like moving me to a different place, saying goodbye to my bodywork practice, and then turning all of my work online to be able to help people all over the world heal from chronic pain. So that's me. I think I live and I do a lot of work in that intersection between people who live in marginalized and like socially impacted bodies. I mean, I think we all do. And then there's some people who carry that burden even more. And I think I just bring that biopsychosocial understanding of what it's like to live in a maybe like uh, almost like kind of like having more contact with threat and danger. So living in a fat body, living in a queer body, I think those things have effects on us on a subconscious level or on a very conscious level. So I like to bring this mind body framework and intersect it with that kind of compassion, but also understanding that there are these social, like that there are like individual, personal, physiological impacts of larger social constructs. That was
Thank
not brief.
That was awesome. And I'm really appreciating like I'll share what I was thinking, which is I love getting to have these kind of conversations where like we're sitting down and we're recording and because of that we're like addressing thoughtful questions and sometimes kind of like very basic questions like what do you do? Because I got to hear like we've known each other for a while and I've been getting to know you in multiple different contexts. But I learned more about your story and your path through what you just shared.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
So, I will say this, like things that I like as a uh, whatever, that was a word. I don't know where it went. But I've helped people with like migraines, back pain, fibromyalgia. Like I think that's helpful to name. Certainly, in
Yeah.
a lot of those conditions, people don't believe are curable or have remedies. So I really like to bring in. I'm going to get to my soapbox now. Bring in this idea that we can heal.
Yes. Amazing. So I'll share a little about me on so you and I do similar work. We're in similar realms. And like everyone, we've all got our own like special sauce, as I like to say. Um, and so my formal titles, I guess, which we'll probably get into that. Like I hate formal titles, but they do exist. So I can introduce myself as I'm a licensed therapist. I am also a coach. I kind of prefer working in the coaching realm because it's a bit less codified. Um, and I work generally with folks who also have chronic pain and other symptoms that are related to stress and nervous system dysregulation.
Mhm.
Um, and what led me to this work was my experience with migraine, uh, experiencing migraine attacks over a course of like over 10 years. And they gradually became a massive intrusion into my life. They started taking over my life. And similar to you and like so many other practitioners I've become friends with, my entry point into this mind body work that we do was the Curable app. Um, and prior to that, I had been a client in somatic therapy and I had also been a student of somatic therapy. I was getting certified in somatic experiencing and I'd been involved in that as a client for like 10 years and as a studying a practitioner in training for a few years. And so I was very much open to the idea that these symptoms have to do with emotions and that they can be shifted and healed. But there was like a major puzzle piece missing for me that was preventing me from making the shifts that I knew were possible. And I would say that when I found the Curable app, it was like getting this cognitive piece to fit together with the body based piece, just start like, it was like, oh, okay, now I'm on a trajectory where there's like tangible change happening.
Oh, I love hearing that. I had no idea that you were involved in somatic experiencing for so long. That's super cool.
Yeah.
When I was a massage therapist, I mean, I still have this now, right? Like, I want to study everything.
Yeah.
And so that was one path I was considering way back when. And I think there, I think the kind of a not cognitive piece, you're naming something that's so powerful and important for me in my work is I really value both, right? The bottom up
Yeah.
and the top down. We have such a strong need to make sense of things. They have to make
Yeah.
sense. Like there is this yearning and desire for congruence, like, or congruence, or however you want to say that word.
Yeah.
And we do that with language and with ideas. And then what's been really, really fun is becoming a hypnotist is like the art of weaving language. So it's weaving cognitive things, but bringing in like the freedom of imagination. So it's really fun when I'm working with clients and even myself, like opening the door to my imagination because I know it doesn't have to make logical sense. It's like how the words feel, the
Yeah.
experiences and sensations they evoke. Um, and so really having the freedom to like think about all of these pieces as tools that are all intertwined, that are all interplayed, and that make a difference in people's experiences and then in the kind of like what's possible for healing.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you where my mind is going. We like had this mini conversation before we started recording about like what points we could cover. Um, but I'll just share where my mind is going and see if that feels like an interesting direction to you.
Mhm.
Is like I feel like we talk about this a lot, this kind of frustration with all or nothing approaches that exist out there where like approaches that are purely body based and that don't bring in the cognitive and then approaches that are purely cognitive that don't bring in the body approaches that are only about pathology and approaches that kind of maybe can feel dismissive to symptoms.
Mhm.
Um, and what's coming up for me is like when when I found the Curable app and was able to like bring this cognitive piece into the somatic work or the body-based work, I kind of had this sort of angry frustration experience
Mm.
where I was like, I just feel like everything I was being taught in somatic experiencing, which has had a huge positive impact in my life, and I've learned a ton that I still use. Um, but I was like, I just feel like I kept being guided to like move away from narrative, move away from cognitive, because that's getting in the way of connecting with body sensation. And I feel like I've just been lost in this like mapless, amorphous, like body awareness quagmire of like not knowing where the hell I'm going.
Oh my God. And we know what it feels like to feel lost.
Yeah.
Like the last thing I want to do is wake up in the morning to do the day and just start out by feeling lost.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're like on an experience and you get a little lost. I'm like, it could be fun. But yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. And I kind of like hearing that you're mad. Like, because you are the nicest person ever. Now, of course, I'm sure that you can, contain multitudes,
Yeah.
but I just like, oh my God, you got mad at like Peter Levine. Like, what the hell?
Oh, I
That's a
got
little
super
bit of
mad at
that
Peter Levine.
authority. That's like a little thread of that authority piece that, yeah, we could totally touch on.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I think that it's important to break away from this all or nothing. There is one right answer. And I really like the more I do this work, the more I'm like, it's got to make sense to you. Like it
Yeah.
has to make sense to whoever. And then it's like the invitation to like, how does this feel? Not like, how do you think it should feel? Or what
Yeah.
do you think you should be doing? But like the really direct. And then like, what are you noticing? What are the thoughts that are coming up? What are you noticing? Right. Uh, and yeah, there's like, it is complex. I would love a map. I might make a map. Like that might be fun. Like, but I choose your own adventure map because
Yeah.
I also don't like people telling me what to do. So
Yes.
that's also like a thing where I'm just like, somebody says, do this, I would just will be like, no, and you can't make me, even if it's me saying, do this. And so I think in a lot of my work, even in my own personal movement practice, now I have options. Like I created a little play area where I've got like a rebounder and a little recumbent bike, and I have a little weight thing, and like I just pick something.
Yeah.
Um, because I don't have a routine. And for the longest time, and I think this is the part that like I'm still unraveling, that jealousy that like somebody else has the answer, there's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
And often my internal narrative, and this is where looking at everything through a mind body lens has been so powerful. What I realized is a lot of my internal narrative is the same thought, which is you're doing it wrong,
Mm.
or somebody else is doing it better.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember encountering you in the very beginning, and you also have a kind of like social justice, liberatory like framework. You are talking about power dynamics in the world. We're not just talking about being an individual brain and body, but being a person and a part of a larger whole. And you talk about power.
Yeah.
And I was so mad because I was like, no, that's my thing.
Yeah.
As if there's only one person is allowed, but there's some, I don't, there's some developmental part for me that like I just run into it now. I just laugh because I'm like, oh, of course. Like there that is. That like
Yeah.
feeling that feels kind of terrible when I notice, oh yeah, I kind of feel like I'm doing it wrong.
I have to say one of the things that inspires me most about you, like one of the ways that you inspire me the most, I often watch your the videos that you share on Instagram, on social media, and I see them as being so honest about like your humanity, which, and I relate to it so much. And I feel like it's very permission giving. And I thought it was so funny when you were saying earlier, like that maybe it was a little bit surprising to hear that I felt angry at somatic experiencing because I come off as very nice. Um, and that made me think about like masking. Um, which is something I think is such a intrinsic ingredient to chronic symptoms is that masking. It's like that tightness and that concealment that we're holding around our authenticity because we're afraid that our authenticity will get us in trouble or will make us appear not to be nice or, will make us unlikable or get us rejected in some way. Um, and when I watch your videos, I feel both jealous and inspired and like invited in because I'm like, oh, right. Like I just keep forgetting over and over and over again that it's not only okay to be human. And when you're human, you're going to feel jealous, you're going to feel angry, you're going to feel like all of these things that we consider to be messy. Um, like not only is it okay to experience those things, it's okay to talk about them openly. And on top of that, it's actually really helpful to the people that we're helping, to the people that we're supporting, whether it's our clients or our colleagues or our friends, because like we're all holding that armor of protection around us and it hurts.
It does hurt. And some of it is like a natural response to the patriarchy, to white supremacy, to like that kind of gatekeeping of authority and expertise. And for it has taken me years of putting myself in uh, in the like heart of my own work and like holding my own hand to be able to be this kind of like the person that you see in the videos,
Yeah.
where I do feel the most authentically myself and in service of people, right? Like the videos I make are obviously meant to like help evoke something or teach or share a process or,
Yeah.
people are not getting all of me all the time on the internet. That would probably actually just be boring. But
Well, also
but
you're like holding yourself through. You're like, I'm feeling all these wild things, and here's how I'm observing myself, like loving myself through this experience, coaching myself through this experience.
and I think for me that has been uh I think it was that felt very dangerous because it seems like, one, being emotional, having emotions, you know, everybody's been told that's not professional.
Right. Yes.
And like, women can't be leaders because women are emotional, as if anger is not an emotion.
And
But no,
practitioners can't be like people also,
yes, and
which is
practitioners can't be people.
especially just like what? Like, how is that helpful to anyone?
Well, and if you look at like the way people go through med school, like that whole process is incredibly dehumanizing. Like they don't let
Oh,
people
yeah.
sleep. Like you don't have a body that has needs. Like how can people serve actual human beings
Yeah.
if if they're like if their entry to their career has actually required them to be like superhuman or to
Yeah.
be a high performer, all of these things, right? We lose that kind of like animal body of our human experience. We are much more like a plant than we are
Yeah.
like a machine. And so for me, it's been incredibly healing to do this work, to have um, amazing relationships with my clients and be effective,
Yeah.
right? And to like help people radically transform their lives through these skills and show up as myself on the internet.
When you said that it felt like scary or risky at first to be open in this way, one of the things that made me think about is like it made me think about how, for example, you and I met and connected as like colleagues and friends, and how I've made connections with other colleagues. And one of the things I hear clients talk about quite a lot is how isolated and alone they feel with what they're struggling through, which I can completely understand and relate to. And I feel like I no longer feel, I mean, there are moments when I feel alone, and I have people that I can reach out to and be vulnerable with. And that still feels risky, but I know that it's the rewards of doing that are worth it. And I think the way that I've formed connections with you and other, peers of ours is really through taking risks like you're talking about, like being a little bit more open and vulnerable than I necessarily thought felt safe. But it was only through doing that I've formed connections that feel, you know, connecting, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Can I jump in? I
Yeah,
think
please.
one of the things, I mean, like, I hope you give yourself credit as being like the person who's issued the invitation to move deeper as colleagues and peers and friends. Um, because that's my experience of you. I also like, I mean, the way that you create a group and hold space, it's so beautiful. And like, and there's something that's so simple about it. Like, it's such a useful reminder that like connection and communication, it can be simple when we kind of get out of whatever, if there's a tornado happening on the inside. Um,
Uh,
like there can be this simple step out of it. And I just feel like I watch you create that all the time, even today in a conversation in our group. I was like everywhere, and you were just like, is there a question that, and I was like, yeah, it helped me form my own thoughts and feelings and ideas. And I like, to me, what's so beautiful about that is I don't have to be like fully put together, have all the answers, know everything, right? So that, and part of this is like, I am a verbal processor. I'm getting to know myself by being like, hey, I have this like half-formed thought. Hey, can we like run through it together?
Yeah.
And but the together part, like you initiated this idea of together, and I just really love that. And I love that. And it's
Oh,
really helped because I think I have felt kind of alone and separate sometimes in this work because I'm a coach and not a therapist. And as you watch this field unfold, like I was an early adopter
yeah.
and I took a lot of trainings, and in those trainings they were like, you can take the training and you can give us money, but we're not
Right.
going to put you on our provider list because you don't have these particular letters after your name. And now we've seen that shift and change because we see that coaches are very effective and people who are trained in this work. And but those were like spaces I had to navigate through, and there was not a lot of like, oh, you're welcome here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've got to say, like, as someone who, like, I happened to go that route of getting the therapy credentials, and like really fairly recently, I was another thing you and I have in common is that we come from like many other careers before this and many other backgrounds. And like I worked in reality television for 10 years. I did other stuff before that. But that was the thing I did most recently before going to grad school in 2017, not all that long ago in the grand scheme of things. Um, so yeah, I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And like that completely makes sense. And I sort of feel like having the credentials didn't make me feel any more connected to community
Yeah.
on on a relational level.
I think that's so important to articulate because I think sometimes, right, we let our like thinking brain, right, the problem solving part of us run the show, and it kind
Yeah.
of runs the show based on an assumption. So it's like if our brain says, hey, I have to have a certain kind of credential to belong, um, then, we go off, we do that work, we get the credential. And then at the end, you're like, oh, hey, I have the credential, but I don't feel like I belong because belonging is a feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, feelings can be found anywhere. Like, if we don't know what it feels like to belong in the world that we're in now, why is getting a credential going to then suddenly create that feeling for you later
Mm,
after you've spent a lot of time and money and whatever? I mean, I'm not
yeah.
saying don't get a degree. I have a few. Um, but it's like sometimes the I'm always like inquiring, like I'm really curious, right? Curiosity is kind of my brand. Curious about like the intention driving any action. And
Yeah.
if the intention behind any action is an emotion, I'm just like, what if we just found that emotion and intended it inside of you now, without having to
Yeah.
jump through all the hoops and do all of the stuff that your brain is really, really believes. And there's so many reasons why our brain believes a particular thing or not.
I don't know if this is going to feel connected to you, but what you're talking about, it reminds me of a particular stage in my own like mind body healing journey when I was had found the Curable app and I had like read a bunch of books and taken a bunch of courses and like I had stuck my feet deep into the mud of mind body healing. But I still was experiencing these like extreme migraine attacks that felt out of control, and I felt, frightened by them. And I was just like, felt like if I could just have a session with that practitioner, or okay, now I did that. Now if I could just have a session with that practitioner, or if I just read this one more book or take this one more course, or, all these things. And I remember I reached this point where I had this one more session with this practitioner who I thought, like, that person just, like, they held the answer. And if I could only, get a one-to-one with them, I would find the magic key. And then I did have a session with them, and, it was helpful, but it didn't, it
It
didn't
was
like
not
unlock the
magic.
heavens. Right. It didn't magically form self-trust, I think, is what I'm seeing now looking back. And I had a conversation with another colleague at the time, and she was like, that person, as wonderful as they are, does not hold the answer for you. Like, nobody else holds the answer for you. And that was frustrating to hear at the time, but looking back, like, she was absolutely right. And there's this duality, and then going back to that having a map idea, where it's completely true that having education and learning from other people is pretty much essential to finding our way. And it's also completely true that letting go of the idea that someone else has the answer and building that relationship with ourselves and that self-trust is absolutely a non-negotiable for healing.
I think for me, I love everything that you just said. And this is why I kind of feel I just have a mind body approach on everything in my whole life, because what it holds, what it makes a lot of room for, are paradox
Yeah.
and exposure,
Ooh.
right? So that nothing changes unless there's exposure.
Yeah.
Like if we think about literally the development of a child's brain, like how we learn to walk, like we need exposure for all of those synapses to grow, for certain developmental things to happen. Like, so there's sometimes in like nervous system speak, people will only just want to feel calm.
Yeah.
And I was like, we don't grow when we only feel calm. Now, learning how to feel calm, like believing, that you're safe or whatever, those are really important things. So this work has changed the way I view myself and I view the world and how I engage in my life. And that includes work. And because I'm always me, so many of my fears show up in my work. Like I am not a good person to be like, just know how to show up to my 9 to 5 job. And then like that just gets locked away. And then I like put that down and then I am myself. Some people are amazing at that, and I love that for them. I have never been able to do that. And it's only been through like having work that was like when I had a store, I'm like running around and moving, and it's like a lot of things are happening. And then when I was a massage therapist, I still was moving. Not a lot of things are happening, thankfully. So I really have learned like there's a kinesthetic quality, there's a embodiment, there's a evoking, there's a being in and with the experience that I'm having. And a lot of times there is this paradox quality to it, which is when let's bring this back to mind body work. And if we're talking about pain, when we're attending to an unpleasant physical sensation, we're not just like staring at it, or like fearing it, right? It's like we're attending with a particular quality. We're trying to like invite something that we want more of into our life. And it doesn't just show up like at your door on a schedule. It shows up because you practice it, right? So this idea of neuroplasticity, I think also what I like about mind body work is like it has science, right? It has some nice juicy brain science that, even if it's a metaphor, it's just really useful to think like, of course, our brains need repetition to
Yeah.
learn. And then we get to be the ones with agency and decide, what does that look like? How do I want to engage and practice this in a way that's going to support my whole being? So that's some of when I show up to work and I like read your post and then I have a big feeling. Like now I'm noticing my feelings are much more positive because I'm like cheering you on and I'm excited for you as your business and you as a practitioner. I've been listening to your podcast. And so now there is a new part of me that's not just like feeling like, oh, I should be doing that or I should be doing better. But now there's just this part of me that just thinks you're amazing. And I'm so excited for people who get to work with you. And I don't feel in competition with you. I feel like we're collaborators in this larger, like getting the word out and helping people. Like this in the world of mind body medicine, like we're in this very formative baby years. Like there can't be enough people to
Yeah.
help everybody saying this stuff and doing this work. So now I notice that I'm like, oh, those colors are so great. And I'm so excited. And like, oh, the way you worded that post was so cool. And now I feel open to learn from you and not just be like, it's okay, or I'm mad because I can't do it. And then I go into my own shame spiral. And then, like, what's the thing I'm not doing? Like,
Yeah.
working, like, showing up to my work.
I
So,
think one of the things that's so valuable for me anyway about having these conversations is I'm like, it's such a relief to know that you have all those feelings and experiences, not because like I want you to have difficult feelings, but I'm like, because I have the same feelings too. So it's so normalizing. And like, actually, you started your podcast before I did. And I remember like looking at your podcast, I'm like, Deb has a podcast. She's like so far, far more advanced than I am. And like, oh, I'm so behind, whatever, like all of the stories. And I'm like, Deb's just so
mm,
confident and like using her voice. And um so yeah, I just find it's so helpful to connect with each other, even when, or maybe even especially when, like what the other person is doing is a bit triggering to us because it's like stirring up all our own feelings about what we want. And when you were talking about exposure, what I what was coming up for me is like, gosh, this conversation we're having right now, and that we're recording it with the intention of letting other people listen to it, like this is totally exposure for me. Even though I've been like doing a podcast for a while, like I'm like, gosh, I feel so self-conscious. I feel the fear in my body. I feel it like this kind of exoskeleton of like protectiveness. I've talked about this before on the podcast. I feel this sort of like deer in the headlights, like, oh my gosh, am I going to blank out? Because that's just how, that protectiveness comes up in this setting. And at the same time, there's this duality where like there's also a part of me that is confident that it's safe and okay to have this conversation with you, to share this conversation with other people. There's this part of me that's confident that whatever is coming out of my mouth does make sense. And somehow, like, I'm able to move forward through this conversation, through life in general, through being a practitioner, even even while all like the fears are there. It's not like they've ever gone away or they ever will completely go away.
yeah. But they change, the
They do
fears
change.
change. And sometimes what's fun is almost like I can see my fears, like sometimes like out the corner of my eye, and they're almost just like waving at me. They're like, hi. And I'm like, hi. And they're
Yeah.
not really interrupting anything.
Mm-hmm.
I almost sometimes feel like all these parts of me that I used to believe I had to reject to be able to like be a professional or help people or I don't know, be a grown up, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Like I had to the some of me is okay, but these other parts of me, they're not okay. They're not acceptable. And I think I finally done enough work and I don't know, almost kind of just rejected that conceptually and then figured out what does integration look like. And
Mm.
I think integration in a mind body setting also is really powerful the way that we talk about having flares, symptom imperatives. Like there is this understanding that like being human is a lifelong experience and there's like no escape from it. And
Yeah.
I don't mean that in like a threatening way, but it could sound
Yeah.
like the Jaws theme music is behind it, right? So what's helpful for me is just to remember even though I have the urge and the impulse to believe that parts of me are unacceptable, like one, I did not create that framework in which was told and believed that to be true, right? That's handed down from my parents and their parents and whatever. Like these are legacies and whether we think of being a cycle breaker, whatever feels empowering, but I just get to say like who says that's true, like who
Mm.
made that up, and really that's been very, very helpful. And just be like, what if it's just not true and all of me is perfectly acceptable,
I
not at
love
all
that.
times, obviously, or whatever that means. But yeah, and just like the relief that I experience in being like, no, I don't have to reject any part of me. We just need to figure out how to live together.
I love that. I just wrote down what you said. What if all of me is perfectly acceptable? I feel like that would be a great thing to have embroidered onto a wall hanging.
Mm.
Especially because like I'm a practitioner. I help clients with this stuff. And for me, part of being human is that when I'm in a flare up of feeling scared, I forget that in that moment. I need a reminder, whether it's from myself or from a friend or a colleague or a podcast or an Instagram post or wherever. Um, and I was thinking about you were talking about going through flare-ups of symptoms. And I feel like I've I've grown so much confidence in moving myself through flare-ups of symptoms, which I absolutely have flare-ups. And something that's more of a growing edge for me at this moment in time is how I move myself through flare-ups of like fear or insecurity in my business as a practitioner. Like when I offer a course and then like 10,000 people don't sign up in the 10 seconds after I first announced it. Like, it's like there's this whole roller coaster of emotions that I'm learning gradually how to coach myself through, but that's like much more of a growing edge for me still.
Hmm.
I'm curious if you have like
Oh,
your ways of moving through those things.
I think I think what I've been working on this past year is like wanting to build a relationship with my work that I don't want to leave.
I
Uh,
love that.
so I previously, when I owned this clothing store and I loved it and it was very important for a lot of people. Like it's been closed for over 10 years and people still talk to me about
Mm.
how impactful it was. And for the longest time, I couldn't even take in what they were sharing. All I felt was this intense shame.
Mm.
And while I was running the store, like I didn't have any of these skills and I didn't know any of this stuff. So who knows what would be different. But like I just felt like I was uh like attached to a runaway train and I just did the best the best I can. And
Yeah.
like there were moments that were amazing. There was a lot of moments that were like really painful and really hard. And so one, I really believe in what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I love working one-on-one with clients, which is how I'm working right now. And maybe I'll love whatever way that continues to transform. But there was this part of me that was afraid that history would repeat itself.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing in mind body stuff, right? The brain remembers painful experiences, right? That's how memories
Totally.
are encoded. High arousal emotions encode memories. And the
Yeah.
brain's designed to help us survive by anticipating danger. So for a while, my brain wouldn't really even let me be like, I have a business. Like for the longest time, I made a podcast, but I didn't tell anybody I had one. Or like, I
Yeah.
didn't, I wasn't able to like articulate like this is what I do, this is how I help people, please come and work with me. It was always like this kind of sideways stuff. It was indirect, and it wasn't because I'm like bad at sales. It was because my nervous system was like, we are terrified,
Yeah.
and I had to build, like I had to unpack it because I did not know what was happening for the longest time. And with help and different coaching communities and different containers, and self, like all of these kind of self-witnessing practices, right? So I think of self-healing as like having its foundation in self-witnessing, you know. And so yeah, and again, that sense of exposure, right? So noticing if I did put out an offer, how I felt that day, how I felt the next day, like what I noticed happening in my mind and my body, like what are my thoughts, but also like my nervous system's communicating something,
Yeah.
right? And now being able to lean in and get curious. And I feel what's so great is like my body is its own tester for how much I feel like I've healed that past
Mm.
experience and that past fear. I have a lot more trust in myself. I'm being thoughtful about like how I work with people. I'm not just like creating a bunch of ideas and running around and like launching and like overworking, but not, you know, I'm really noticing when I feel like I'm in like proving energy. So I'm getting these like more and more and more subtle invitations to um lean into, I get to have this business in whatever way supports me, because when I am wholly supported, then I am more available to help other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's helped me the most so far with riding the waves of being my own boss, which is something that I wanted for so many years. I mean, it's obviously not the top reason why anyone goes into being a coach or a therapist. Like, you don't go into that area without a strong desire to help other people, oftentimes through stuff that has been very challenging to ourselves. And so we're like wanting to connect with other people who are going through that. Um, but certainly a significant piece for me was like, I am so sick of working for other people in television and before that in publishing. And like, I just want to be the captain of my own ship and do things the way that feels good to me, that feels aligned to me, that, makes sense to me, that I can like get behind. And that is something I love. And it also comes with, for me anyway, an emotional roller coaster because you don't always know how things are going to go. And you're like charting unknown waters. And it's just like having a community of peers to connect with and know that like that that connection is steady through all the waves that I'm going through. And I see other people are also going through waves and they're not falling off, the edge of the earth. They're going through waves. And that's what we're all doing. It's so important to um, get that perspective by being able to watch other people's trajectory, because in my own trajectory, I'm just in that little like dot that's sometimes in a dip and sometimes on a crest. But getting to see other people's trajectories, I can see it from that zoomed out space of like, oh, I see there's just waves happening, just like with the mind body experience.
I love that. I think it, if we were to unpack that, it's like also to see one, to like be able to pull back, right? So we like pull back the image or open the frame, right? So just from that one dot of your own internal experience, but also even looking at other people's experiences. Sometimes like, if we just look at other people's, whatever the work that they're doing, and almost like our brain takes a snapshot of that moment, and then we just use it to beat ourselves up, we actually have no knowledge of anything about what that other practitioner is doing to create the results that they're getting in their business. So
Yeah.
we're blocking knowledge and connection and information. It's not even like, I mean, maybe they'll share with you or not, but like there's almost this assumption that's happening. And we see that all the time. I mean, Instagram creates a kind of a false narrative of people's lives. And then
Yeah.
we're invited into make a false narrative of your life, and that's how you're going to sell your work, right? So there's something about how social media has conditioned us to see other people as objects, and then to self-reflect, often in a punitive or judgmental way with ourselves. And I mean, I just don't think that's helpful. And so what I love about what you're saying is like you're able to like pull back the camera and also just like see that everybody's on this journey. People are in different places, but there is always a wave
Yeah.
for everyone. Everybody's navigating the ups and
Yes.
downs of what it means to be a solo entrepreneur, to have a business, to be a human being, right? Like whatever kind of challenge we can put on it. It's not like somehow you're an employee and everything is like amazing and magical, or when you're an employee and you want to like have your own business and be the boss, that like when you get that, then like it's only going to be sunshine and daisies and all of the problems are going to go away. That type of all or nothing thinking, that kind of magical perfectionism, it's nice, but they're myths.
Yeah.
And you're going to be you if you work for somebody or if you work for yourself. Now, I prefer working for myself, and I often joke that I am like the worst employee and the worst boss. And the same, like I'm different at different times, right? Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, like sensing into like being able to see that there's this journey unfolding in who I am, what I do, how I help people, how I show up every day to work, and that there's this sense of what I like, what I'm hearing you say is like we're on this journey together, even though we're on our own ship.
It's so funny because I think like our social conditioning, or I'll speak for myself anyway, I feel like my social conditioning pushes me to believe that I've got to figure everything out and become perfect, whatever that means, and get to the place where I know everything and have all the answers and like have my image all, sparkly before I can connect with other colleagues and form connections and trust that, people will want to be friends with me or whatever. Um, But the truth of the matter is the only way to form a real connection is by pulling down that, that facade and letting yourself reveal your messiness to another person. Like that's how genuine connections are actually formed. And I think there's a parallel there to mind body recovery where like there's this conditioning that pushes us to think we've got to figure it all out and fix ourselves and get rid of the symptoms and like be in control.
Mhm.
Um, when so often, like what we need is just to give ourselves permission to fall apart and like let it all happen however it's going to happen so that it can move through and find its way.
Yeah. Yeah. And giving up control is to do it on purpose by choice is challenging. But I think that the answer to that is so, like, you get back so much more when you,
Yeah. You do. And you grow confidence through like making little experiments with that. Like maybe not like blowing things up all at once and like revealing every single thing about yourself to a person you just met or but it's by making little experiments and allowing yourself to be vulnerable that you then start to build trust in it. There's this funny story. It's kind of a tangent, but it's just reminding me of when I was in my first career after graduating college, and I worked at an architecture magazine as a junior editor. And I was so afraid that people were going to find out that there was like a ton of stuff I didn't know. And so I decided that in order to soothe that insecurity I had, I was going to stay late after work every single night and read every single back issue of this magazine that had ever been published, like every word of every magazine. So then I was going to know everything. You could just imagine
I
like
just like
how
feel my whole
stressful.
body is like my whole posture is
Oh
just
my God.
deflating.
Just
Oh.
horrible,
And
horrifying.
I want to like reach to the past and take that you and just like put them in a big warm
Oh,
hug and just be like, oh my God, I love you and I love that strategy. Like, of course, it makes so much sense. Did
it's
it
it's
help you
fail
feel?
proof, right? Of
Yeah.
course not. Right. So like I obviously failed at that almost instantaneously because that is just like a mission so filled with dread and suffering that like it's impenetrable. And I remember like it took a while to get there, but I remember one like I just, I let go of it because it was completely undoable. And then one day, months and months later, I was like, "Oh my gosh, remember that time when I thought I had to read all the back issues of this magazine?" And like, I didn't even realize it, but now I feel confident that it's okay not to know everything. And that is so much more empowering than knowing everything.
Yeah, because when you're like you prove right, this is about seeking safety, right? So when you create a strategy of safety by knowing everything, then it's only going to feel more and more and more and more unsafe to not know
Yes,
something. So you're
absolutely.
creating this self-fulfilling prophecy. And of sort of safety, safety is so complex, right? So when we start to unpack safety, the feeling of safety and the feeling of unsafe are perceptions. They're based on reality ish, present, past, the world around us, the things that are happening. So it's like there's a way in which now I sometimes just like I can have a feeling and I'll just sometimes pause and be like, where am I right now? Am I in the present? Am I in the past? Am I in the future? Like, what's my brain is trying to help me. And let's just like have a moment, just be like, well, I am right here, usually sitting in this chair. So let's just like, that is always this place where I get to come back to. And having this understanding and this language and this framework has been so powerful So I'm gonna do I did a whole website rebrand and
I
that.
love your new website, by the
Thank
way.
you.
I had a total jealousy, like, but super celebratory feeling when I saw your new
Well,
website.
and I'm going to do a whole podcast and I'm going to do a podcast interview with the design company
Oh,
that I
amazing.
worked with because everything showed up, right?
Mm,
So all of my imposter stuff, all of my self-blame, all of my fear, all the things showed up, and I finally have broken through the narrative of like, oh, if I pay for this thing, like that's
yeah.
going to change everything.
Mm,
So that was like a useful thing because I just showed up like, I paid for the web design, whatever. And then I like showed up to do the work just like myself. Like it didn't
right.
just magically change everything. But now
Yes.
when I look at the website and I really see myself, like that was my bargain. It was just like, this is going to be 100% me. So it's not going to be
Right.
like I'm not wearing a flowy beige outfit by the ocean, which I love the ocean. But right, like
But you're not a
this,
beige
I'm
person,
not a
from
beige
what
person,
I know.
as you can see, but whatever. Right. And no, that's not dissing, but there's certain like
Yeah.
wellness, like, right,
Yes.
ideas
Like
and
what we
all kinds
think
of
it's
things,
supposed to
what we
look
think it's
like.
supposed to look like, who we think we're supposed to be, to
Yeah.
project this idea that like I fit this bill, right? So I'm so excited because that was an incredibly powerful experience, not in the way that I thought. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited. So, but now when I see it, I feel the experience of all of that healing. So it's not even like I show up to work because I like have this website and I feel super confident. It's like I look at that website and I think, oh my God, I have just gone through this next level of like creating so much peace and safety for myself as a practitioner, and as a business person. Like, okay, what can I do with that? What's
Yeah.
next? So,
I feel like I got a lot of healing just from hearing you describe that. And it was making me think also, like when you were saying, when I told that story about working at the magazine and you're like, I just want to go back in time and give that person a hug. It made me think about like, if I could go back in time just a few years to when I started out as a practitioner, like what comforting message would I want to share with myself then? And I think it's very, very similar to the message that I'd want to share with myself at the beginnings of my migraine recovery journey, which is just like a reassuring, like, you are going to find your way. And like, yes, read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, like, gravitate toward everything that you gravitate toward, and just trust that your own way is going to emerge from this and it's going to keep evolving.
mhm. Oh, I love that. That's so loving. Although I am curious if you actually said that to you, then would
Mm.
you receive it?
I think probably there would be part of me that would appreciate hearing it and would on some level know that it was true. And also a part of me that would feel like that's great, but that's just not where I'm at right now.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, the thing that I really, if I could go back to the very beginning, is to say like, again, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to be in proving energy,
Yeah.
and to have fun
Yes.
and just like not, it's like I want to say let things unfold, kind of what you're saying. Um, yeah, but that like I will find my way. Absolutely.
I feel like I'd want to go back in time actually and give myself permission to be uptight about everything. you
Okay,
know,
that's
to feel it, because
amazing.
I think I put self-judgment on myself when I know I'm being like, trying to control outcomes. And I'm like, I should be outcome independent. I mean, this relates to
Mhm.
symptom recovery and to the practitioner development.
Yeah.
But I feel like when I hear people say, oh, just let that go, it just makes me tighten up even more. And what I usually need to hear from myself is like, it's okay to be in control freak mode. It's
Mhm.
okay. And just
Yeah.
hearing that actually helps me soften a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's really, I don't know. I have nothing else to say about that. I'm going to let it kind of course through me because that kind of permission, that level of permission is so beautiful. And like that, it really pushes the anti-perfectionist buttons for me. So it's great.
I feel like that word permission is, for me, it's a headline to the nourishment that I receive from knowing you. That is just something that comes through really strongly for me.
Thank you. Um, one of the things that like, there's a sense of like you cultivate things in a way that is so beautiful. It's like not only do you experience it, but you also like you're a creator. And I see that as a through line in your work, in your podcast, in the questions that you ask. Like I'm often like kind of in my experience and kind of like swimming my way through it, and not to have a comparison. But I always find this quality that you're like, how do we kind of make it so that we're all able to kind of engage? I don't know. That's just what I see in you. And I
I
love and
love that.
appreciate that.
Thank you so much for that reflection. I was listening to it and I was like, I wonder if that's my reality TV background.
It could be. Reality TV is so specific, right? You're always kind of like editing and slicing and creating. And I
And
used to
finding
work
the through line.
finding the through line. I used to work in television as well.
I
So
didn't know that, Deb.
yeah.
No, what? How did I not know that? What area of TV did you work in?
I worked for a TV lit agency.
Oh my
So for a
gosh.
while, that was
That's wild.
yeah, when I lived in LA.
How where how should we wrap this up? What kind of, I don't know.
It's
How do
a
we bring
really
this
good
together?
question. I think right, like this podcast is an invitation to listeners to be able to kind of relax and into whatever it is, that kind of like awareness, that mind body awareness. So whether it's like you're noticing that you're really controlling things, you're noticing that you're trying to manage your feelings all the time, you're notice that you're like have this like fear that you're not letting be seen or come out. So that's my how I would like to wrap it up, as like an invitation. Obviously, if people want to work with us, work with you, work with me, you are invited. But just in the listening of this podcast and receiving it, like what are you noticing happening in your body? And then what do you want to be curious about?
I love that you're wrapping it up with an invitation. So I'll just add my own invitation. What I'm getting from this conversation is an invitation to take a chance, like choose like a little risk to take and take a chance on opening up to someone and letting yourself be seen just a little bit and just see what happens, see what comes from it, because it might bear fruit that is much, whose sweetness is much greater than the fear.
Mm.
Um, where can people find you and what can they reach out to you for?
Sure. People can find me and my work either on Instagram, thecuriositycure.coach, or my website, thecuriositycure.com. And I have a podcast of the same name. And I'm working with people one-on-one on all types of mind-body experiences. So almost regardless of symptoms, dealing with unwanted physical and emotional experiences, helping people feel better.
Nice. I'll share where people can
Yes.
find me. You can find me at my website, annaholtzman.com. You can find me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. I also have a podcast. If you are listening on Deb's podcast, you can also check out my podcast, which is called From Chronic Pain to Passion. And you can reach out to me as well for one-on-one work. I have a few different online courses, some live group programs, and check out the website and you'll see all the stuff.
Amazing. And if you are listening to it on my podcast, yes, I highly recommend you go check out Anna's work and all the different ways to even listening to the podcast, reading posts, these are exposures. I think our work is really aligned. And so I love the idea that people can nourish and feed themselves from the work that we both do.
And vice versa. If you're listening on my podcast, please go listen to Deb's podcast. I think it's so valuable to get to hear, similar stuff, but just from like different, unique personal perspectives, because you're going to have your own unique personal perspective. And it helps to know that there's not just one way to think and experience this stuff.
Awesome.
Thank you, Deb. Hey friends, it's Anna. Let me ask you something. If you're struggling with chronic symptoms, have you ever felt like pulling your hair out and screaming, "Why the bleep am I still in pain?" That's definitely what I was asking earlier on in my recovery, so I can totally empathize, and I would love to help you get some clarity. So I've created a quiz just for you that's called "Why the bleep am I still in pain?" And yes, you can take this quiz even if your symptoms are not pain specifically. Just head to my website, annaholtzman.com, and you'll see a big old button there that says Take the Quiz. So why don't you head there right now before you forget? And if you found this episode helpful, please go rate and review the podcast. That helps other people who are struggling with chronic symptoms too to find the podcast, and I would appreciate it enormously. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take good care.